Touchdown, Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Hey everyone, welcome into The Process on this Thursday afternoon. I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Subscribers, you know what to do. Hit the notification bell. Be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. I am here each week to break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news, so be sure to stay locked in with us by hitting that like button and also hitting that subscribe button while you are at it. Like I said, I will break down the latest in Crimson Tide football recruiting news, but I'm also here to answer your recruiting questions. You guys can leave your recruiting questions pertaining to Alabama football at our recruiting voicemail at 205-984-3222. That number will be located at the bottom of the screen throughout the duration of today's show. But on today's episode, I do want to preview a huge month on the recruiting trail for the Crimson Tide. Next month, during the month of April, they are set to host a long list of top recruits. I will talk about some of those guys on today's show. I'll also preview a pretty big recruiting weekend for the Tide, as well as they will host a Vanderbilt offensive lineman transfer along with some other top 2023 recruits, and I will discuss all of that on today's show. But to get things started on today, I do want to talk about a couple of 2024 prospects who Alabama recently hosted and recently offered. And we're going to start with Jaden Coleman. He did not pick up an offer from the Crimson Tide, but the Central Phoenix City High School defensive back did spend the day in Tuscaloosa on Wednesday, had an opportunity to watch Alabama practice and also sit in on the Crimson Tide's defensive back team meeting, which included Nick Saban, the Crimson Tide's defensive back coaches Charles Kelly, and also the Crimson Tide's cornerbacks coach and Travaris Robinson. When you take a look at Coleman, currently standing at 5'10" and weighing 175 pounds, flashed some ability during his sophomore season at Central Phoenix City High School, especially his ability to help and run support, and also showed some decent coverage skills as well. So he's going to be a 2024 prospect inside the state of Alabama to pay attention to in the future. But he talked a lot about his team meeting with the Crimson Tide. Just talking about how the Crimson Tide defensive back group went over 50 plays in 5 minutes. You did hear that right. That is what he told me. He said it felt like Alabama went over 50 plays in 5 minutes when he sat in on their defensive backs team meeting. And he had an opportunity to get that behind the scenes look along with practice. Told me that he really liked practice and how fast it was, and how organized it was, and it seemed like everyone was getting reps and no one was just standing around. And I'm pretty sure Nick Saban likes to run a tight ship at an Alabama football practice, so gave me an in-depth look, and he just talked about the behind the scenes look that he got from the Crimson Tide during that Wednesday practice. You guys can check out my interview with Coleman over at touchdowналabama.com. Tide hosted another 2024 defensive back in Tyshawn White for a spring practice recently. He pretty much talked about the same thing in terms of what he got an opportunity to do. Had an opportunity to sit in on a team meeting, a defensive back team meeting. Said he had an opportunity to see how Nick Saban likes to run his secondary. So we see during spring practice, Alabama's giving a lot of these guys an opportunity to get a behind the scenes look at their program, sitting in on team meetings, getting opportunity to watch practice. So I'm pretty sure that's pretty beneficial for the Crimson Tide, giving those guys that look into spring practice. I'm pretty sure it's going to go a long way, and I'm pretty sure it is something that Alabama coaches have missed out on in terms of COVID-19 and how that impacted the whole recruiting landscape, not having an opportunity to host a lot of kids now that they are in the full swing of things of hosting guys now. I'm pretty sure they're happy that they can get guys on campus for practices so they can see how things are run at Alabama football practice. And these recruits are taking to it. They seem to really like to get an opportunity to get out on campus and see everything, and get an opportunity to see the facilities, along with watching practice and sitting in on those team meetings. Another 2024 prospect who recently visited Alabama is Josh Flowers, a quarterback in the 2024 recruiting class who actually picked up an offer from the Crimson Tide. So this in-state quarterback is going to be a guy to know for sure. Currently standing at 6'3". When I saw his highlight film, I've only been able to see a couple of plays. I am going to dissect it a little bit more in the future. We do have an interview of him coming to touchdownalabama.com pretty soon. But when I just looked at his film and saw a couple of his plays, I really love his deep ball, the beautiful deep ball that this guy has with a huge arm. He's also considered a dual threat quarterback. Like I said, I want to break down his film a little bit more, but he's definitely a prospect to know out of Mobile, Alabama, an in-state quarterback who the Crimson Tide have offered in the 2024 recruiting class. But now we are going to turn our attention back to the 2023 recruiting cycle, but we're not going to leave the state of Alabama, because the guy who I'm going to talk about next is a Eufaula, Alabama product, and Yanze Pierre, a 4-star defensive end in the 2023 recruiting class. I recently had an opportunity to catch up with him after he took an unofficial visit to Alabama earlier this month for the Crimson Tide's Junior Day, and he told me after that visit that Alabama is standing at the top of his recruitment. He wants to be committed before his senior season begins, so hopefully he will start taking some official visits during the summer. Said he has a great relationship with Alabama's coaching staff and some of their players. That is why he feels comfortable saying that they are at the top of his recruitment. I know in terms of the state of Alabama in the 2023 recruiting class, especially along the defensive front, you hear a lot of other guys' names like James Smith, like Peter Woods. You hear Kelby Collins. You don't really hear about Yanze Pierre that much, but he's definitely a prospect to know at 6'4" and a aggressive, speedy defensive end. Just looking at his film, his coach actually sent me some of his film throughout the season, and I was able to watch some of that. But watching his film recently, just a full compilation of his junior season at Eufaula High School, and he had to have one of the quickest first steps in this 2023 recruiting class. Very explosive off the edge, comes with a lot of speed, has great length, knows how to use his long arms. He told me that he really felt like he learned a lot during his junior season and felt like he got quicker and was able to use his quickness off the edge. So he's definitely an in-state prospect to note in the 2023 recruiting class. Has Alabama at the top of his recruitment at the moment. Currently has a top eight, which includes the Auburn Tigers. So I think his recruitment could come down to the 2 Iron Bowl teams, so that is definitely something to pay attention to. Yanze Pierre, 4-star defensive end out of Eufaula High School. But now we're going to turn our attention to an out-of-state guy. We're going to talk about Peyton Kirkland out of Dr. Phillips High School in Orlando, Florida. The massive offensive lineman who currently stands at 6'7", weighs more than 300 pounds, recently dropped his top 5 and included the Crimson Tide. Of course, he's going to take an unofficial visit to Alabama during the month of June. He wants to get out to Alabama a couple of times before he announces a commitment on July 23rd. He told me recently that he was in contact with Alabama pretty much every day, just building his relationship with Alabama's coaching staff. Has a great relationship with the Crimson Tide's offensive line coach, Eric Walford. So he's a guy to know in the 2023 recruiting class along the offensive line, with the Crimson Tide being included in his top 5. I think that says a lot, because there are some other schools like Ohio State who have been recruiting Peyton Kirkland a little bit longer than the Crimson Tide, but they were left out of his top 5 and the Crimson Tide were included. And it looks as if he's going to give Alabama a good look before he makes a decision on July 23rd. Speaking of another 2023 offensive lineman, Olas Elanin. I feel like we talk about Olas every week, but he's constantly updating me in terms of what he is doing with this recruitment. He's actually headed to Tuscaloosa this weekend. He's going to be one of the recruits in Tuscaloosa, one of the 4-star offensive linemen, as he will be joined by Miles McVay out of East St. Louis High School in Illinois on this weekend as well. So Olas will take an unofficial visit to Alabama this weekend. He also has an official visit scheduled during the month of June, so the Crimson Tide will get him on campus a couple of times over the next couple of months. Olas Elanin continues to be one of the Crimson Tide's top offensive lineman targets in the 2023 recruiting class, but they are not the only school going after the Finland product. He recently took visits to USC, South Carolina, got an opportunity to get out to Ohio State, so his recruitment is flourishing. He's continuing to take everything pretty slowly right now. He wants to drop a top school list next month. He told me that it could be a top 4, most likely a top 5, so he's going to make a huge cut to his offer list pretty soon. Like I said, Alabama will get him on campus this weekend. I expect if he dropped a top 2, top 4, top 5, no matter, as long as it's not a commitment, I feel Alabama is going to be included in a top school list that Olas Elanin drops pretty soon. So that is something to watch out for in terms of the next step in his recruitment. An update another update I want to provide you guys with surrounds a 4-star wide receiver in the 2023 recruiting class, and I am talking about Hakeem Williams out of Florida. I recently broke down some of the Crimson Tide's top wide receiver targets in the 2023 recruiting class. Like I said in the video, I feel these are guys who the Crimson Tide are trending with. I wouldn't consider them to be their overall top targets because we still have a long way to go in the 2023 recruiting class. I did not include Hakeem Williams in that video, but I'm going to talk about him now because he told me that he's visiting Alabama on April 1st, and I think that was the step that Alabama had to take. They had to get him on campus before I felt they could be trending in this recruitment. But taking a look at what he brings to the table, a 6'4" long physical wide receiver. That video that I'm actually showing you guys right now is a video that I took of him I think last year at a 707 event, and he basically climbed the ladder and looked very impressive on that play. And I just saw that play and I was like, yo, this kid can be really special if he knows how to continue to use his length, continue to add some weight as well. But just taking a look at his junior film, which is what I'm showing you right now, it seems to look as if he is becoming a more physical wide receiver on that particular play right there, continuing to fight up the field, fighting off tackles. He's a good route runner as well. Like I said, a big, long, physical wide receiver, has an opportunity to continue adding on some weight. Currently standing at 6'4", weighing 200 pounds, so he could be a guy who could add on 15 to 20 pounds to be a really big physical wide receiver. So I definitely think he's a guy to know in terms of the wide receiver position in the Crimson Tide's recruiting board in the 2023 recruiting class. Like I said, he plans to visit Alabama on April 1st. We will see how that visit goes for the Florida product. We all know the Crimson Tide's past and their history with South Florida wide receivers and the success that they have had with the Crimson Tide, and a lot of those guys have moved on to the NFL under Nick Saban. So Hakeem Williams will be on campus on April 1st next weekend for the Crimson Tide. We also are going to talk about, like I said, a lot of the guys who are visiting in April, and that's the first thing I want to talk about before I talk a little bit more about the guys who are visiting this weekend. We're going to bring up a graphic of some of the guys who are going to be headed to Tuscaloosa in April, and this is a loaded list, and these are just some of the top recruits, not including some of the other guys, some of the other 4-star recruits who will be in Tuscaloosa in the 2023, 2024, and quite possibly 2025 recruiting class. But just taking a look at this list, you have Arch Manning, of course, at the top, with them being the number one quarterback and the number one quarterback and the consensus number one player in the 2023 recruiting class. You also have 5-star linebacker Malik Bryant, 5-star wide receiver Brandon Ennis, who has basically changed his visit dates to Alabama a couple of times now. He was set to visit earlier in the month of April, but he's actually set to visit on A-Day now. Like I said, he has changed that date a couple of times now. He still wants to get to Tuscaloosa. He will be on campus on A-Day, the 5-star wide receiver out of American Heritage High School. So just taking a look at this list, you see a lot of guys heading to Tuscaloosa next month. So the Crimson Tide will be busy trying to recruit these guys, but they also will be busy this weekend as they will host some top 2023 targets, including 4-star quarterback Eli Holston. They will also host Xavier McLeod, a 4-star defensive lineman who had an opportunity to watch in action at the Under Armour next camp in Atlanta. I was very impressed a couple of weeks ago. Miles McFay, who I talked about recently, along with Olas Elanin. So the Crimson Tide will have some of their top targets in the 2023 recruiting class on campus, along with Tyler Steen, the Vanderbilt transfer, who will visit Alabama this weekend. He's considering transferring to the Alabama Crimson Tide after starting 3 years at Vanderbilt, 2 years at left tackle. We all know the struggles that the Crimson Tide had on the offensive line last season, so they can definitely add some experience with Tyler Steen. He's definitely a guy to pay close attention to, because I feel they definitely has to make a decision pretty soon, because he's going to transfer to that school most likely during the summer. So if that visit this weekend goes well for Steen, I feel that the Crimson Tide will be in a good position to pick up the Vanderbilt transfer. But before we close out today's show, I do want to turn our attention to the Crimson Tide's 2023 quarterback recruiting efforts, because it has pretty much got pretty interesting over the last couple of weeks, with Nico Iamaleava, the 5-star quarterback out of California, verbally committing to the Tennessee Volunteers, which basically is the first domino to fall in the 2023 quarterback recruiting battle, just 2023 quarterback recruiting landscape. And just take a look at some of the guys who are still available, who the Crimson Tide have already offered. You bring up guys like Dylan Lonergan, the 4-star quarterback out of Georgia. You talk about 5-star quarterback Arch Manning, of course, who the Crimson Tide will get on campus next month. And he also talked about Eli Holstein, who will be on campus this weekend out of Zachary High School in Louisiana. It looks as if the Crimson Tide are trending for him at the moment, so he is going to be a guy to pay attention to this weekend in terms of what he brings to the table. Currently standing at 6'3", weighing approximately 220 pounds, so you get a pretty big quarterback. And just taking a look at some of the films that I've seen of him, I really like his accuracy on his deep ball. He's not the fastest quarterback. I wouldn't consider him to be a dual threat quarterback, but he seems to know when to run. That was something that I really liked when I watched his film. So he will be on campus this weekend. It will be interesting to see how the Crimson Tide handle recruiting the quarterback position, with them set to host Eli Holstein, Arch Manning, and Dylan Lonergan over the next couple of weeks. That is just an interesting update and just an interesting development to pay attention to. We are also going to talk a little bit about Dylan Lonergan. Like I said, he is visiting Alabama next month. Hopefully the Georgia product, in my opinion, is a better runner than a lot of the Crimson Tide quarterbacks who they are targeting at the moment. Currently standing at 6'2", weighing 200 pounds, has a big body as well, a great arm. I think, like I said, he's a better runner than a lot of the guys that they are currently recruiting at the quarterback position. So it is just going to be interesting to see how Alabama handles everything at the quarterback position, with Nico Iamaleava deciding to commit to the Tennessee Volunteers, with them still recruiting Arch Manning, Dylan Lonergan, and also Eli Holstein, who they will host this weekend. But that is what I want to talk about on today's show of the process. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Before you leave, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Subscribers, hit that notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube page. Then head over to touchdownalabama.com. Pick up your subscription today. With that subscription, you will be able to read all of our subscriber-only articles, get your hands on our yearly print magazine issue, also get an opportunity to read our in-depth scouting reports on each Tide commit and each recruiting class. If you have an Apple device, download the Touchdown Alabama app in the Apple App Store. If you have an Android device, be sure to go to the Google Play Store to download the Touchdown Alabama app. With that app, breaking news notifications will be sent to your mobile device by the staff here at touchdownalabama.com. As always, I am Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama.
Process.